Good evening, everybody watching tonight. I am with Jim Wilt tonight, the Associate Principal Trumpet of the Los Angeles Philharmonic. And before we get started with the interview, I'd like to thank my two sponsors for tonight, Euclid IQ. You can visit them at euclidiq.com. They are the world's leading compressors of audio and video. And I would also like to thank this week's sponsor, which is Guard Bag. And this is my Guard Bag double, and it has a lot of space for music. So, for example, you can go to studio259productions.com and get one of the Vincent Chikowicz books, or you can go to Fritz Domro's page and get a Bach for Trumpet book. If you teach young students, you can go to Shot Music and look up Christian Thielmann's books for young kids with a piano and trumpet CD. And if Phil Collins is watching, you can go to Phil Collins' site and get classic style for trumpet. So anyway, Jim, it's great to see you and finally get a chance to talk to you. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Mark. Thanks so much for the invitation. Like I said to you earlier, I feel kind of like an imposter here. The list of names, the rogues gallery that you've had on here has been really impressive.
Well,
so I feel like a little out of place, but let's go ahead.
You are far from out of place. I would say 3 major orchestras and 300 etudes is like that's a pretty big feat.
It's a dubious distinction. Oh, wait a minute, my teleprompter just went out. Can you hang on a
Sure. So before we get into all the etudes, because we'll go through all 300, can you? How old were you when you started to play the trumpet?
I was 9 years old. I was 4th grade,
Mm-hmm.
which is when we started in Michigan back then. Really strong instrumental music programs back in the 60s.
Yeah, and was your family music
70s.
in the 70s?
Yes.
Yeah.
My grandparents actually were in vaudeville. My grandmother played piano and grandfather played violin and viola and actually had a dance band. Interesting story. I think he auditioned for Henry Ford, and Henry Ford, at least the story goes, offered him a job with his dance band, but he turned it down because my grandfather was Jewish and was of Semite in. Oh, sorry, my dog just barked. He kind of took me out of the moment. Anyway, he turned it down. So they worked in the old movie houses in the times of the silent movies, and when the talkies came out, it sort of put them out of business and soured them on the whole music scene. So my mother, coming up, actually did not receive music lessons for that reason. So she taught herself to play by ear and had an amazing ear, which I guess she probably got from her parents, and she passed it on to me as well. My brother is also musical. He plays in some rock cover bands. I believe my sisters played in the bands, in school, but I'm the only one doing it actually for a living.
Wow. Wow. Was there any kind of ear training when you, I mean, you said your mother played by ear. Did she do anything to develop your ear?
No, I wish I could take credit for it because I think I do have a very good ear, but it was a gift. So I can't even brag about it because it was given to me.
Yeah.
And I actually took to the trumpet pretty quickly, I think, because of that. I didn't read for a while because of that. I didn't need to. But yeah, not to derail this conversation, but
No.
it's interesting that we should bring up ears because I don't know if you know a guy named Rick Beato. He's got a podcast, or he's got a YouTube channel where he'll analyze pop or jazz music and break it down, the theory and all this other stuff. But he had an episode about perfect pitch, or really, really good relative pitch. And he has discovered that almost universally when people hit 50, they lose the ability to do that. It starts to drop off. And my youngest son, is a musician. He's at the Colburn School, trombonist. And oftentimes we'll be sitting at the table and hear a piece and we'll chime in with what key it's in. And oftentimes we don't agree. And more often than not, he's right. And I'm off like by half step or a step. And that's exactly what this guy is finding, that it drops off.
Are you a half step below or above, or is it consistent?
Yes. I don't know. I'm usually wrong though, and I have to cross check it against all sorts of different excerpts to try and narrow it in. And I'll be damned, I'm still like a half step off. It's weird. So sorry. Let's get
No, no,
back on the freeway,
no.
Mark. It's a fascinating. So I just ran across it the other day. I'm like, wow, that explains some things. You know, because I hate losing my kid, but yeah,
Right.
he's got a good ear.
And it's like yeah, exactly. Well, and were you taking lessons in high school too?
I did. I started lessons actually the summer of fifth grade before middle school, and my elementary school band director actually. You know who Kurt Christensen is? He's a trumpet player. He used to play in the Air Force band.
I know.
Really, really fine player. His father was my elementary school band director. He started me on the trumpet. He encouraged the middle school band director to take me into A band, so I had to go in there and audition for him. And again, I wasn't really reading music. I could play by ear. He had me try to sight read something. It didn't go well. And then lessons started that summer. And then within a couple lessons, I was studying with John Chipburn, um, who was the high school band director. He said, "Wally, you come in here, this kid, you know." And Fitz is like, you know, "I've already heard him. You know, I don't think he's right for A band." And Chipburn said, "You know, I'll have him reading music in a couple lessons." And then I ended up in that band and probably got the living snot beat out of me for the first year of middle school, partly because of that. You know, there weren't too many sixth graders in A band.
Right.
Another horn player and I, and we were just like the brunt of a lot of hazing. It's amazing. I stuck with it actually.
So, so what kind of stuff were you guys working on in lessons in high school? I mean, in middle school, you were probably other than reading, obviously.
Yeah, middle school. I think there was a fair amount of. Well, we started with the Rubank books and sailed through those pretty quickly once I figured out how to do it. And then Arbin,
Yeah.
and then a lot of like cornet solos, stuff like that. Stuff that you would play for solo ensemble. I don't remember that much about it. And the weird thing is, I really haven't. I hate to admit this. I haven't really worked Arbin much since then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it always perplexed me how people knew exactly where to thumb through the book and pick that number, thumb, 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 that number, flip, 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 that number. It's like, how do you do that? And maybe it was just random, but it looked like they knew exactly where they were going every time. And I just can't do that. You know, when I'm teaching, I have no idea how to do that. I don't know the book well enough, and it's I'm ashamed to admit that, but it is what it is.
Well, I mean, yeah, and we'll talk. I want to ask you about your warm up and your things you practice a little bit, but that's fascinating. But who were you listening to when you were growing up?
I was listening to Doc Severinsen. You know, he was Tonight Show band was big then. He was amazing. Um, Doc Schitzer.
Wow.
Yeah, my mom found recordings of him at a record store. We didn't know who this guy was, and just amazing playing. Probably Little Mendez, Herb Alpert, sorry. And then probably from seventh or eighth grade on, Maynard entered into the mix because of the guys that were great ahead of me had introduced me to him. It kind of blew my mind. And then Chuck Mangione and all that stuff. Yeah, those are the guys I was listening to. Maybe a little bit of Miles Davis, a little bit of Clifford Brown, but not nearly enough to call them influences.
That's such great time to grow up with all those trumpet players that were really in the mainstream, though. Because also at that time you would have had Earth, Wind, and Fire and all this. Gary Hay and those guys were doing too.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's constantly hearing the trumpet. So how did you get from growing up in Michigan to Cincinnati? What brought you to CCM for your undergrad?
Well, I auditioned at Eastman and Northwestern. We didn't really know the giants that were teaching at those schools at that time. And my band director talked us into auditioning for Cincinnati. And I really didn't want to go there, because Tony, his brother, was down there. I'm like, oh, great, my band director is going to be keeping an eye on me through this guy or whatever. I just didn't, it felt kind of forced. And I got into all three schools, but the financial package was much more attractive at Cincinnati. It was a full ride, and coming from a middle class background, there, I really couldn't justify spending the kind of money that it would have taken to go to someplace like Northwestern or Juilliard, not Juilliard, but Eastman. So I ended up in Cincinnati, and it was actually a great choice for me.
Yeah.
I think Blee was a wonderful teacher for certain things, and I got playing opportunities that I know I would not have gotten at either Northwestern or Eastman. I wouldn't have been playing with the CSO. I was playing with the other CSO. By the time I was a sophomore, I was already subbing there.
Wow. Oh, Jim, are you frozen?
Am I back?
You're back. You're back.
Okay. Sorry.
Technology. That's okay.
That's weird. I'm hardwired, but every now and then that happens. Hopefully, my wife isn't doing some work up there. She's got a home-based office. Anyway, so where did it drop out?
No, you were saying by the time you were a sophomore, you were already subbing with the CSO.
Yeah, and then Cincinnati. So, in case anybody just tuned in, he didn't play with the Chicago Symphony.
That's very much the CSO though. That's a great.
It was a great orchestra, and by the time I was a junior, I think I was the first call there and playing down there quite a bit, and that kind of experience you just can't replace that. You can't get that anywhere else except sitting there and doing it.
Yeah.
To hear that kind of playing up close, what it sounds like on stage as opposed to what it sounds like out in the audience, and that section was just killing back then. Really amazing.
Who was in that section? Obviously Phil and Mr. Blee and Marie, and who else was in the section at that time?
Steve Pride.
Steve probably was just fairly new in the section at that point. Right?
Steve started, and I believe he won that job in 1980. It's right after I got to school, and I think he was fresh out of school. Right. And he went to CCM as well. And man, he was like everybody's hero. That's what we wanted. Can you imagine getting a job right out of school? When you're in college, that the weight of that over your head, like, what am I going to do if I don't have a job? When I get out of school. Everybody looked up to him, and he's just a monster player. I think he started as fourth, and somewhere during the time that I was an undergrad, he and Mr. Blee swapped chairs.
Right.
So, yeah, just a horse of a player, and he's so powerful. Amazing facility, great ears. He matched Phil so well and was so supportive. Just a dream player. And Marie, she's no slouch either. Great player. Very different player. I think her strengths complemented Phil's very much, but a different sound than him. But I think it worked really well on certain rep.
Yeah, that section. Yeah, they definitely, even when I went, because I did my master's there, even though they were very different players when they played together, it was fantastic. And what kind of things did you pick up from some of those people? Especially, we're talk a little bit about Julie before we go on to the section that Phil and Marie. But
Blee. He was not what I would call a fundamentals teacher, and I've never really had one of those. That anybody that primed me on all that stuff on Schlossberg and on violin and whatever. But he was a real stylist. He had a great sense of music and pacing and phrasing, and really how to play these excerpts in a way that would resonate with not only an audience but with a committee. And not that there was one way to play it. He would describe different ways you can do it, but it was always really tasteful. I think his nickname was Clean Gene. It's kind of ironic, because he was always dressed very dapperly and drove a Cadillac. But it was all about style with him, and just a true gentleman. At least the side of him that I know. I haven't heard otherwise, but I can't speak for the people that worked with him. Maybe that was a different story, but he was always great.
Yeah, I've always heard that same thing. He was very proud of his time in the orchestra and wear a pen on his jacket. If Frank Miller described him too. It's what about what kind of things did you pick up from Phil?
Phil was just refinement. Obviously, an amazing lyrical player, just beautiful player, and always so prepared. He never sounded sloppy. Everything was just The technical stuff was, his timing was great. Certain licks that trap even the best players. One that comes to mind is like Capriccio Italian, that little. You always hear even great players, they get a little out, it just gets a little sideways, and it exposes them. And nope, Phil was always just bam right there. Great player. Um, yeah, beautiful sound.
Yeah.
Always a lyricism to it. And some people, I remember, grumbled about that sometimes, like, wow, he always sounds like he's singing or whatever. They wanted a little bit more ugliness, if you will. And
Yeah.
I don't think he was willing to do that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think, he never compromised his sound. It was always just beautiful.
Yeah.
And whenever I've got anything special like that to play, I really try to hear that in my ear and bring that to it, because it was amazing. I never heard anything like that. I don't know if I've heard anything quite like that since.
Yeah, he could really do some amazing things. I took lessons with him when I was in school there, and because I stayed with Marie, but I would go see Phil.
Yeah.
And I remember one week I kept missing or chipping or probably missing just the A in the post-horn solo.
Mm-hmm.
He says, "Oh, you should be able to pick up the horn and play that anytime." And he had been on vacation all week, so he picked his flugelhorn up and nothing came out. He said, "Forget I just said that." But then the next week, same thing happened. No, you should be able to come in a fifth higher than that. So he plays the phrase before it, and instead of playing an A, he plays the most beautiful high E on a C trumpet I've ever.
Wow.
And I was like, started packing my trumpets. And
yeah, that's amazing. He always had a kind of a wry sense of humor too. He could kind of get right to that, like a finger in the ribs, and bah. But yeah, just great. I never studied with him. Gene was a little jealous of his students going off and seeing other teachers, and I was very respectful of that. I didn't want to cross that line.
Right.
But I learned it was so much just sitting next to him and listening to him. When I was subbing, it was like a lesson every time, a paid lesson every time I went down there to work with him. Yeah, but just incredible.
Did Marie ever have any comments or anything you picked up from her sitting around her?
She coached my brass quintet, and I think my senior year, I'm pretty sure she took over the brass rep class,
right,
from Betty Glover. And I think I've only had one lesson with her, and it was because I was probably either a freshman or sophomore, and I was paranoid that I'm not doing all these fundamentals that I hear everybody else doing. Maybe not so much at Cincinnati, but you hear through the grapevine, I'm not doing these things, and I didn't know how I was going to get from point A to point B without that, And she had a few very interesting on-point comments, but I remember it was sort of like a cloak and dagger. I had to kind of sneak into her studio. She just looked around, make sure that Blee didn't see me go in there, and it was a little weird, but I understand why, But yeah, I obviously a brilliant player, and I learned a lot listening to her as well. She played assistant to Phil quite a bit, and to again hear her strengths paired with his, and I think they were pretty savvy about how to utilize them best. And the pop stuff that she did was really, really so full of character and spirit. It was really neat to see that. I don't think she got the credit that she deserved maybe when she was there. Again, the sound was a little different than what was in vogue at that time. You have to remember, this is early to mid 80s, and Monette was just coming out with his stuff, and Charlie was playing it, and Bud was experimenting with it, and the whole push was towards dark, 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 dark is good, big, dark. And Marie's not that kind of player. There's a lot of life and color in her sound, and I think we've kind of backed away from that now, and we're less apt to label things as bright or dark,
right,
and more good, color rather than dark,
right.
Yeah. So anyway, a little tip to Marie in case you're watching, Marie.
I'll send it to her after.
Good. Yeah, I think she was definitely underappreciated, and some of the guys back then would probably even acknowledge that today.
Yeah. Did you do anything with Tony Chipburn or Mike Hatfield when you were in school? Were they involved?
Not directly with me. Obviously, I knew both of them because their studios were right next to, were right down the hall. And
Yeah.
Tony, being John Chipburn's brother, I already sort of had an in with him, and I hung with the trombone players. Tony was a very interesting character. should say is. He's still with us.
Yeah.
Almost a savant on
Yeah.
the trombone. Ridiculously capable player, and his students had so much reverence for him. There's just stories of them reading quartets, and he's almost reading trumpet parts on a regular tenor trombone, just sailing through this stuff. But yeah, character. Just have you ever met Tony?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah,
He was there, and I always thought he was really underappreciated.
yeah. I think in his prime he was like a killer player. And again, he's very unassuming. He got interesting, kind of speech patterns. So it'd be very easy to dismiss him, like who is this guy? But really funny dude, and very very talented. And he's put out some amazing players. I don't know if Pete Norton was there when you were there.
He was in the orchestra. Yeah.
Well, yeah, Pete started out as a tenor trombone player and phenomenal player. He kept making the finals and all the auditions that Alessi was there. New York Phil, blah blah blah, Montreal. He read. I think when Alessi left Montreal, was he there? Then Pete won that. I mean, just amazing player. And then he got bored with that. Oh, actually, that was he won the bass trombone job in Cincinnati first, I think, and then he took the tenor trombone job principal in Montreal and won that, and then eventually went back to Cincinnati, but just monster player. Anyway, sorry, that was my Tony Chipper thing. And Mike Hatfield, sorry,
Yeah.
I'll get to him real fast. Didn't really have any direct dealings with him, but just unbelievable gentleman, just super, super kind, nice, beautiful man, and a great player. Not a real power player, as I remember when I was there, but could just turn gorgeous phrases and just great.
Yeah.
Great man.
It was, he was very, very sweet. And who were some of the other students that were there when you were there were you in that era?
Well, Mark Ridenour was there.
So I thought
I think he started there my sophomore year, and he was maybe starting his master's. I think master's or maybe doctorate. He was there. I'm trying to think of people who are working now. Doug Clark was there. You won't know him, but he went on to play lead in Buddy Rich's band.
Well, he's watching right now, and he said hello on the.
Oh, hey Doug. But another one of my heroes, man. I remember. I think he started off like in the Dorsey band or the Glenn Miller band, and within a month or two, he was on the Buddy Rich band. And man, when he came back in town, oh my God, Doug Clark. I know Doug Clark, lead trumpet, the Buddy Rich band. We were so proud of him. I'm trying to think of guys that are working right now, and I'm drawing a blank. That wasn't one of the pre-questions.
No, I forgot. I meant to ask you that, but it was. So you had a pretty good crew around you, and you just had Steve Pride right before you got there getting the orchestra. So
yeah, and I think Mike Miller might have been right after me. All sorts of very good players. I don't know if they went on to play professionally, but a guy by the name of Charlie Johnson was my roommate. I don't know if he's playing now, but yeah, good guy. If it comes back to me, I'll bring it up. But yeah, there were all sorts of good players around me. Rich Dean was there with me. He's a French horn player who's now acting principal in New York. Right. But just great player, great guy.
Well, and really probably one of the more important questions about Cincinnati is it Gold Star or Skyline?
Oh, come on.
Skyline, right?
Skyline.
Okay.
Of course. I won't say literally because somebody will say, you know what literally means, don't you? But just this side of literally, kill. I'd walk down Fifth Avenue and pop somebody.
To have a Skyline near you?
Yeah, for some Skyline and a cheese killy. Cheese coney right now. Oh, man. And I didn't get it at first, It's the first time somebody brought me there. I'm like, what is this crap? It's horrible. Took about 3 times, and it's probably like heroin, and I was hooked.
Yeah, that's exactly
Absolutely
right.
Hooked.
I felt the same way. Give me 2 or 3 times, I'm like, this is nasty, and then
And then like, I can't live without this. Yeah, 2 or 3 times a week is what it turned into. So yeah, love that stuff.
And we're still living to tell. Um, so after Cincinnati, you went to Eastman and stayed with Charlie Geyer.
I
Now
did.
talk about but you were already a very experienced player at that point.
To some degree, yeah. It's relative to my peers. Let's
Yes,
put it that way.
right.
And I'm sure I showed up with this attitude, like, oh, I'm sure I was unbearable. Bragging about all these guys in Cincinnati. I remember, talking to the trombone players about this great Pete Norton. They're like, who? I think they know him now because Pete's gone on to some amazing stuff. But yeah, so I showed up with a little bit of that attitude, and Rochester RPO is a very good orchestra, but they're not the same tier.
Right.
For not mainly because it was an AB contract orchestra. I don't know if they're still that way, but they couldn't be. They didn't have it. Wasn't a full time full orchestra. But so I had a little of that going on. Let's see, where am I going with this? You want to know what?
Yeah, what was Charlie kind of getting you to work on?
Oh, we did a lot of etudes. Oddly enough, probably transposition. It seemed like a lot of busy work. I'm sure he had a plan, and it was all very helpful. We didn't hardly work on excerpts at all, but I'd worked on tons of excerpt in Cincinnati. It was like solo etude excerpt every week, pretty much
Right.
in Cincinnati. So we did very little of that, but we worked on solo rep. We worked on the etudes, refining my playing, shoring up some of the stuff that maybe wasn't as strong. I had phobias about maybe playing around C and above. I've never been a natural high note player, and I still am not. I have to work on that stuff. Pick playing, I really didn't know how to do that. It was kind of a mystery to me. I sort of did it. Combination of Charlie working with me and assigning me stuff, and Bill Campbell, who was Barbara's TA at the time. He was in his second year of his master's when I started as Charlie's TA. And I think Bill was kind of, I don't want to say the wrong thing here, and maybe I'm speaking out of turn. He didn't seem like he was part of the in crowd. He was a great player, and maybe the strongest player there, but he didn't hang with guys like Prosser and Snedeker.
Right.
So he kind of saw me, and I won't say latched on, but he took me in. Let's put it that way. And he had a recital coming up shortly after I started there, and ended up playing two of the pieces on his recital with him. One was a Sam Adler duet that was written for Barbara and Charlie called B and C, which was hard, and then like a Verdant Capriccio duet thing that Barbara and Charlie also did. But he would come in every night, after we're done practicing, and to put like the Telemann flute duets on the stand and make me sit there and sight read piccolo duets with him, like up a third or up a fourth. I forget what they were. And it was just that every day. The book takes you up to high Fs and high Gs without you even thinking about it. It just does. So you're playing them without getting all uptight about it, because it's not like the credo. You don't know what's coming up. And I wasn't a big deal anymore. I don't even work on pick anymore. And the credo will come out.
Yeah.
Now, something like the Brandenburg, that's not coming out. That's something that would take me months to work up. But virtually anything in the orchestral rep short of that, it's not a problem anymore. It's more of a mindset, and I credit Bill with a lot of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so after Eastman, your first job was it Denver, or did you win a position in Rochester before that?
Well, the first job was Dayton, actually. I won that the summer between my junior and senior year. And so that pretty much paid for my living expenses. At that point, I told my parents, I'm good. I don't need your money anymore.
Yeah.
Your money's no good here. So yeah, that was great. And between that and subbing with the CSO, got a lot of pretty good experience. Obviously, it's a small Ropa orchestra, but it was still really, really great experience and good people. And then I don't know how, but I talked my way into the sub list on Rochester shortly after I got there, and was subbing with them somewhat. And then the fall of my second year in Rochester, there was an opening because Tom Drake had gone. Where did he go? Where did he start? With maybe Charlotte or something like that. I forget where it was,
Right.
but he won a job, and that created an opening. And then I had kind of turned into their first call there, and I ended up winning that audition. And then I think by January, yeah, that's when the audition was for Denver. The day that the Challenger blew up was the day I won that job. Yeah, and like 2 weeks later, I was in Denver. Yeah, I'm like, I'm out of here. I didn't need to finish school as far as I was concerned. The whole thing was just to get a job, and a couple eyebrows were raised. I had to meet with the dean. He's like, we could make you pay for all this, your education, but we're not going to do that anyway. So yeah, by mid-February I was there and never looked back.
Now you were there in Denver. How long was it before Denver kind of had the financial issues when you got there?
Well, by that September, we took a 20% cut, and we had these negotiations coming, and I remember naive me thinking, "Oh, great, we're going to get a raise." I'm like already making pretty good money for that time. It was 1986, and I was making $30,000 a year, which was pretty decent money in Denver. I thought, "Wow, this is awesome!" And then that's when the real education started, the stuff they never talk about in music school.
Right.
Like, whoa, it was dark. It was not cool. So yeah, that's when that started. And then a couple of years later, we're at it again. They wanted like another 20 or 30%. And I think Philippe Entremont was the music director at the time. And he was like trying to talk the orchestra into just this one more time. And we're like, forget you, man. It's a long story, but it was kind of a manufactured crisis.
Right.
The community really rallied and raised a bunch of money to cover what this deficit was, to keep the orchestra and the season going. And then the board decided to take the ticket money that came in the spring. Normally they would just start using it. That was the model. Well, this year, to be financially responsible, they were going to escrow that money until the following season started. And to the public, that seemed like that's reasonable. They're being very good stewards of this money, but it created an immediate massive deficit. And that's when the orchestra was done. Yeah, that was the end of the Denver Symphony. They went bankrupt, and that was it, because the musicians were not going to negotiate under these circumstances. They didn't take those cuts.
Wow.
And the week before that happened is when I won the Houston job. And my tape was not accepted for that audition. I know you've probably heard this in other stories that I've told. But the whole plan was, let me think about this. I previously at the audition that Sax won, I was in the finals with him, and I may have even been runner-up. We were right there, and I know I'd gotten some votes from the trumpet section. And then, so for this audition, I sent a tape in, and I get this letter rejecting me. I'm like, what? So I called up the personnel manager and said, "Hey, listen, I'm not asking you to give me the job or even to put me in the semis or finals. I just want to show up. I was in the finals last time, and I've won a job and been in finals somewhere else since then." And Larry was like, "Okay, I'll talk to the committee and I'll get back to you." And a couple of days later, I hear the phone ring, and my wife answers, and she's railing on some guy. "Well, yeah, you should have." I hear this. "Well, it's Larry," and she's like laying into him, like he shouldn't have had to beg for this. I'm like, "Oh shit, don't blow it," So I got invited, but I was still smarting a little bit. The ego was bruised, and the whole plan was to go in there and win it, and then tell them to shut it.
Yeah,
shut this job. So when I did win it, I really wanted to say that, but I knew what was waiting for me back home. And I just remember telling them, "Yeah, I've got some soul searching to do," after they congratulated me on winning this job. And they're probably thinking, "What? What's with this guy? What do you mean you've got some soul searching to do? We just told you won the job." And then, a couple days later, bam, out of business. I didn't have a choice. And again, fortuitously, it forced me into a better situation. And it was like a quantum leap in my development as a player, to be exposed to the likes of John DeWitt, you know.
Right. Yeah. You were really around DeWitt in his prime.
Oh my God.
I mean,
Yeah. Incredible.
underrated principal trumpet player.
Yeah. Yeah. He wasn't the greatest at everything, but he was really great at a lot of stuff, particularly like the heroic, like Strauss and Mahler and Prokofiev and pop shows, you know, stuff just strong as a horse and sound like this and just so much integrity and character. And he threw himself completely into it. Just, you know, it's I know it's a cliche, but he swung for the fences every time and usually connected, and it was something special. But to try to keep up with that, it just about destroyed me. It's like, how am I going to do that? And over time, I came to the conclusion that I'm not. You know, I can't. I'm just going to complement him. So our skill sets, I think, complemented each other really well. He carried the bulk of it, and I was really good at the light, agile stuff that worked well for my job. You know, as the concerto dog.
Yeah.
But man, very very fond of those times, and
When you
really developed my sound. Yeah.
What position were you playing in Denver?
Denver, I started out as assistant principal and principal in pops, and then I negotiated up to associate principal because it was more representative of the job I was doing. I was playing a lot more principal. I wasn't assisting. I was doing a lot of principal playing. Manny, good player, but a little mercurial. Sometimes he would just decide he wasn't going to play something, and you know, it might be a last second thing. Boom, over the fence, and that was another education about you better be prepared and mentally allow yourself to go out there. You know what I mean? Sometimes you can throw up this thing. It's impossible. It's impossible. I can't. Well, you don't have a choice. Just do it. You know, the fate of the world isn't resting on your shoulders. It's a concert. Get over it. You're not that important. So,
but then in Houston, it was third associate, right?
no, and Houston, it was fourth and associate.
Ah.
And I've got this vague memory of thinking, you know, when Mark left, I'm not Mark, Mike. sorry, Mike. He was not associate then, and I thought, oh, it's Sax's old job, and I don't know if I had processed that the job I was auditioning for was a title position, because they did have an assistant already. Bob Walt was the assistant principal there, and I don't know if it was until after the job. It couldn't have been. I had to have known it was an associate position. Anyway, yeah, it was fourth and associate. And I'm sure that subject will come up again either now or later when we talk about my position here.
Exactly.
So whenever you want to talk about that would be fine.
Well, we'll get to that, because how many years were you in Houston before you went to New York?
I was there for about 5 years, and I did something that I tell my students to never do, and something that I busted mucky on once on Trumpet Herald, and created not only a massive rift between the two of us. It was my fault. It was a stupid thing to do. It was conjecture. I was using that audition to as leverage to negotiate my own personal contract. I figured, well, you know, maybe if I can make the finals in New York, I can use that. You know, tell Houston, hey, I'm somebody that plays at this caliber. I'm making finals in New York, and you know, I need some more money. The semifinal round went really, really well. It has never happened to me before or since. After I got done playing, the committee applauded, wow. Which is like, wow. And Warren Deck was the proctor, and he goes, hey, man, they never do that. You know, so then all of a sudden I'm thinking, I better take this seriously. And I got really excited. And then the duet round was later in the afternoon, and Phil and I sat down and played duets, and it was like, you know, a glove. It fit, and somebody from behind the screen said, you guys sound like brothers. I don't know if it was Myers or somebody with a, you know. Anyway, so then I started getting really excited about it. Where am I going with this? What was the question, Mark?
How long you've been in Houston? I think you were starting to talk about leverage.
Yeah. So then it was less about negotiating a new contract. The finals were like a month later. Another very, very long story. That didn't go quite the way I wanted it to, for a variety of reasons. Some of them my doing, some of them their doing. But the next day were the finals for the fourth job. And then I won that. And then they said, well, we're going to have you come back in the fall. There'll be an invitational. And then, we'll audition for the associate. And that's when Sullivan won that job. Anyway, yeah, so then I went back to Houston, and a lot of the management, along with the Houston Symphony Chamber players, were on a tour in Japan at the time, and I was going to try to negotiate a leave of absence with them. And so they weren't around. I was talking to the personnel manager, and he goes, we've always done it before. I'll continue to try to get a hold of them just to verify that. And so the next day, I'm, New York's like banging on the door. We need an answer from you. So the personnel manager said, I still can't get a hold of them, the time zone, all that stuff. He says, just assume you've got it. We've never turned it down. So I tell New York, okay, yeah, I'm coming. And then a few weeks after that, I go in to talk with the general manager to coordinate when this leave will happen when I start. And he sits down and he goes, well, we're not sure we want to go down that road, and grant this. I'm like, what? I was told I had this leave. He goes, well, he spoke out of turn. Yeah, we're not sure we want to do this. They had just lost their associate principal Horn to New York, and he had, gotten a leave. His was a different situation. He was from New York, went to Juilliard, was good friends with Myers, wasn't all that happy in New York. There was a pretty good chance he wasn't coming back. They had given him the leave, and it pushes the whole replacement process out by like a year or whatever. Right. And so, yeah, the committee met, and I think Eschenbach, he didn't want to risk it. They were trying to apply a little pressure to get me to stay. So they came back and said, we've decided we're not going to give you the leave. And I'm like, okay. Well, I've already told New York I'm coming. And the general manager said, it's okay. I can make a phone call and we can make that okay. And I said, no, it's not okay. They didn't create this issue. I'm going to go to New York, so I'm going. And then they were shocked that was my response. And then Nancy Gooderell, who was third horn, I think is still third horn, knew Barb and Charlie from the Teton Festival. And she went out on her own and called them and said, hey, would you be willing to play for Jim to split the year? And they said, yeah, they did. They came to Houston, and Barbara was pregnant at the time with Jory, which is amazing. But they each spent half a season covering for me so I could have that leave, which is, unbelievably generous. So as it turned out, I loved playing there. And half the time I was there, Vince was out for a variety of reasons. And I was playing second and loved it. It was just amazing to sit next to Phil and just hear that every day. It's just incredible. And I love doing that. But then when Vince would come back, I'd go back down to the fourth chair and play second on the piano concertos and the overtures and hide in the weeds. And, trumpets, we don't need to hear you kind of playing. And prior to that, I was an associate who'd worked on trying to get my sound out. So it was miserable to try to hide that, that coupled with the fact, and this is one of the questions, that you were going to ask, what was it like playing for Kurt Masur? There was a hazing process with Kurt Masur. The new people, he would just lay into just to see how you would handle it, and probably also let you know who was boss. But if you were new, it was relentless until you got tenure, and then whoop, hands off. So there were two new guys in that section, Sullivan and I, and whenever the two of us were on stage, it was like a lightning rod. Just we could not do anything right. And I'm thinking, it's funny, I'm not playing any different than when Phil's out here. And it's perfectly fine then, but now it's not, and everybody told me, don't worry about it. He does this with everybody, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, a lot of people thought the reason I went back to Houston was because of that. It wasn't. It was more so, and I'll say this to my dying day, not everybody believes it. I'm the kind of guy who I will atrophy if I'm not on it all the time. I'll just get lazy. I'll lose my nerve. I need to exercise that muscle. And I didn't want to be the guy that, was sitting on stage, fourth trumpet, and the 1911 version of Petrushka comes up, and I got to play a high C. I haven't played a high C in public in how many years? I don't want to be that guy that ruined Petrushka. And sure enough, that season, 1911 version of Petrushka comes up, and Sullivan and I are playing the piccolo parts. I was terrified, but I saw the writing on the wall. If I stay here, I'll rot. And I'll just lose the ability to do that. So it was a really tough decision. It was an amazing brass section, not only from a performance standpoint, but from a support, from a collegial, everybody's opinion mattered there. Even the lowly fourth trumpet, people would ask me, what'd you think of this? Or if they're trying out new instruments. There was a real respect, like you had earned your position here. You were part of the family. So that was tough to walk away from, but I know it was the right decision.
Yeah.
So I was there about a season and a half, and then I went back to Houston in '95, like June or July of '95, right in time for an Asian tour, and then was there I think for another 9 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and thought I was going to finish my career there, and then Houston started having some money and contract problems, and I don't want to go through this again.
Yeah. So then the opening happened with LA, and
yeah, they already had at least one or two auditions for it, and I let them pass. It was kind of intimidating to me, the whole LA vibe, because you hear stories of Stevens. He was gone by then, but just, McGregor, you look at his picture, he looks very stern and like he'd be a badass. And
he's really a sweetheart.
Yeah, he is. He's the sweetest guy in the world. He's amazing. I was really comfortable in Houston. I loved my life. We had this gorgeous house, Queen Victorian house, 5 minutes from work. I got to play golf at least once a week, all the time. Really a nice setup. Amazing food. The weather sucked, but incredible neighbors. And then they had their audition, and a guy that had been in the Houston Symphony and then had gone on to LA, a cellist, called me and said, "Hey, we just had this audition. We didn't hire anybody. Would you be interested in coming on for the next audition?" And I'm like, Dave, I really like things. I appreciate the call. Thanks. But, I think we're probably just going to finish up my career here. And I hang up the phone. And my wife's like, "Who is that?" And I said, "Dave Garrett, from LA. He's telling me about an audition coming up." And she said, "Call him back and tell him you're interested."
Wow.
Because, she's hearing grumblings of we'd already been through it in Denver. And it was horrible. And we'd been through some of that in Houston, like in 96, I believe, 97. We went through kind of a nasty negotiation. And I was on part of the negotiating committee that negotiated the contract that got them in the position where they're asking for like these 25% pay cuts. So I, called them back. It was still, I think it was a nationally advertised audition, but I was able to negotiate being put in the semis because the prelims happened during the week leading up to the semis and finals. And knowing that we had a work stoppage on the way, I really didn't want to forego a week's salary if I didn't have to. And this is something that, I wouldn't recommend doing, but, we had Monday night concerts and the semi started on Tuesday. So, got up early that morning, drove to the airport, warmed up in the parking garage, and the weird looks I got from people like, "What are you doing?" Got on a plane, flew out there, took the taxi to the hall, and within a couple hours was playing that audition. But one of the stories I like to relate was on that plane. I'm reading the editorials in the Houston Chronicle, and some guys just bashing the musicians, those greedy musicians. How dare they? I would do it for half the money and blah blah. And I'm just getting madder and madder and madder. And the strategy that works well for me that you've probably heard is I try to get a little anger because I can't be angry and nervous at the same time. I discovered that early on. And so I was like almost foaming at the mouth by the time I went on stage. I mean, it can't come through when you're playing, but really, I mean, I was a little bit edgy because I hadn't taken an audition in a long time. And the semis were okay. It could have gone either way. It was okay. But by the time the finals came around, I'm like, I had the confidence knowing that, okay, the committee's interested in what I have to play. And it pretty much came out exactly the way I wanted it to, that round. There are only a couple rounds I've ever played that went that way. And I think they may have asked me to play a Bruckner Symphony over again just to play it more broadly, and that was it, you know. But even then, I still had to play a trial week because that's what they were doing, and that went fine. And you know, here I am.
Do you remember anything that, in particular, the Bruckner that was on the audition in the last movement? I mean, the last round.
Probably ding, beam, boom, ba boom, ba boom, ba boom, ba boom, that kind of thing. Just making sure that going all the way to the edge with those notes and just super length and weight. Not so much volume, I don't think. Maybe a little bit, but it was more bring a little bit more gravitas to it.
And was Esa-Pekka was the music director at this time, right?
He was, yeah.
Right.
I think I did play Parsifal too on Rotary. They wanted on Rotary, and I had a Hetman at the time. Sorry, park that thought for just a second.
Yeah.
And there was no way I was going to get Parsifal out of that Hetman, so I borrowed Jim Vassallo's. He had a Rico Kuhn, that I thought played beautifully, and that's what I played that on. And bought one right after that audition because it was just such a different animal than either the Monkas or the Hetmans that I was used to playing. And then I played that for a long time till I bought the Weimar. So, yes, sorry to interrupt you. I wanted to get that out before I forgot.
You forgot. Wow. Was there anything that Esa-Pekka asked or requested that was weird or interesting, just like really kind of straight ahead?
I don't think so. And that was kind of a trademark of his time here. I don't know if it was because he's Finnish and doesn't talk much. You know, he does. He's very charming. He's actually a ridiculously funny man, very sharp. But I never got much feedback from him. And I did almost all the offstage stuff. The only thing I don't remember playing offstage with him was like Unanswered Question and maybe Pines of Rome. Although the last time we did it here, when Tom was Hooten was here, I did play the offstage solo with Stalin. First time I'd ever played the offstage part. Anyway, but yeah, I always come back waiting for some feedback. Tell me it's too loud, too soft, you know, blah blah blah. Nothing. So you never knew whether he loved it or hated it, you know. And as musicians, we need that reassurance, and you just weren't going to get it from him.
Right.
He actually is much more vocal about his expectation now as a guest conductor than he was when he was music director here.
Well, talk a little bit about the setup, and you had the same thing a similar thing in Houston, except in Houston you had a third assistant, right?
Yes, third assistant, fourth and associate.
Yeah, as opposed to now where it's like Jeff's position is third trumpet, right?
Yes.
Principal, second, third, fourth associate, right?
Yeah, I think this setup works really, really well. So the fourth guy doesn't atrophy anymore.
Oh, you're stuck a little bit, Jim. Hold on 1 second. You're stuck. We'll see if you come back. See if you're stuck on here. Negotiate input in the semis. Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Okay, some editing.
There'll be some.
Now to piece this together.
Yeah.
Are we back on?
We're back on. I'm sorry about that, everybody. Yeah, sometimes, you know, the Wi-Fi is more like a dial-up or something. So.
I'm actually hardwired, but our internet is every now and then it gets weird.
I know I am too, and it just for some reason it jumped onto some other kind of thing. So, but the last thing I heard you were talking about, we were talking about that you're set up in LA that the fourth guy doesn't atrophy.
Yes. Yeah, the beautiful thing is the third guy doesn't have to play everything because what would normally happen is third guy plays principal on the first half and then plays third on the second half, while the fourth guy either doesn't have anything that week or leaves at the half. So, yeah, this works out great. When I'm playing first, Jeff plays second to me, generally,
Right.
and Chris plays second to Tom, and then Jeff plays third when there are three or more. Um, so yeah, I don't have to play everything, and it keeps me a little balanced because I'm responsible for the low stuff and the high stuff. Actually, it's the only chair in the section where I've got to play every chair: assistant, principal, second, third, fourth, off stage, fifth on Muller, sixth. So it's an interesting position, but I think that works really well. Yeah, I think Cincinnati at least used to do that because that's what Marie was,
They
I think.
they did do that, and then Doug Lindsay did so much principal, he became associate, and Chris Karajic was fourth assistant. So it's very
Okay.
similar, very similar.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I think I have that right. I'm sorry, Doug and Chris, if I have it
That
back.
sounds right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's a good model. Nobody gets off easy.
Right.
The one reason to keep it, third and associate, and maybe this works better in some European orchestras. It's a great place to park the principal player after a certain period of time to leave that spot for them to move to. So you've got that wealth of experience in the section, but maybe somebody's past their physical prime, and the responsibilities of playing that principal job week in and week out are enormous.
Right.
So no disrespect there to our European colleagues that have that tradition. I think it's a wonderful tradition. Anyway, that would be the one argument for that you've got a place for that person to still contribute.
Right.
But I like the model. Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of your section, I mean, everybody in your section you're all in your prime, and
Well, three of us are.
well,
Not so much the old guy you're talking to. I'm
I
I'm
don't,
I'm on the backside, dude. I just turned 59, so
well,
I'm at this point.
you're still on the bass pads at least, right?
Yeah, I want to at least establish a glide pattern so it's not just a nosedive. I'm fighting it. It's hard.
But I mean, you guys, everybody in that section is doing something. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Tom's doing all the things he's doing, and I know Jeff is, and Chris has all the entrepreneurial stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm also just guessing is there much shop talk in that section?
There's not that much when we're together. There's not that much. Usually Tom comes in. He's like a little kid. He's hyper excited about some new discovery he's made. I liken him to the Tiger Woods of trumpet, because Tiger, after he won the Masters by 6 strokes or whatever it was, he's like, no, I want to beat him by 20. And like the next year he did. It's insane. It's never good enough, even though it's phenomenal. He's always reinventing and rediscovering what's going on in there. And again, he's like a little kid when he comes in. He's got new devices that he's inventing, and it's fun to watch. But I've never been a gearhead,
Yeah.
and I think the rest of the section, I mean, we're interested in it, but we don't live and die by it, which I think is what makes this section work.
Right.
It's just we're more likely to start, telling dirty jokes or see who can go lower, stuff like that. I mean, it's a really good hang. Everybody appreciates and respects each other, and there's a universal work ethic there, which helps. We don't have anybody phoning it in or kind of sandbagging, because that can create a lot of hard feelings.
Right.
Everybody's giving it their best.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and it comes across that way. I mean, the things you guys do and the way it sounds.
Yeah, I love this section. They're great players and just even better human beings.
Yeah, and the latter of those two is always the most important thing.
Can be. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um, Can you talk a little bit about Dudamel? I mean, you're kind of with the Bernstein of this generation in a way, probably.
Yeah, the dude, yeah, he's a force of nature. You know, he really is. Everything you've heard about him, it's amazing. And in spite of that, he is as down to earth as he could be under those circumstances. He's always approachable if you can get past the entourage of staff that are trying to insulate you from him. But you know, when you do get to him, he's you know he's a cool guy. Um, he's intense. He's very passionate about his music. He's immensely talented. And as good as he was when he started, it was a little eccentric. Some of the stuff was a little over the top. It was always interesting. But I think over time, his interpretations, his musicality has just really come into its own. It's maturing and I won't say aging gracefully because I think he just turned 40. He's still a kid. He's still punk. Um, but yeah, um, I grow even more respectful. It's like English is my second language here. Um, yeah, there's more appreciation for him the more I see him conduct certain things.
Right.
He's the depth beyond his years, and he's getting better at this at the things that we didn't think he was as good at, like contemporary music. When he first got here, I don't know if he did much of that in Venezuela, but L.A. man, every concert we've got something on it that's contemporary. He's had to, and he's actually gotten quite good at it. And yeah, he's
What do you think
he's something.
what is his strong suit in the repertoire?
Mahler, Tchaikovsky. He does great Mozart. Yeah, uh, those are the things that come to mind. Just the passionate things or the things that require crystalline, you know, clarity. He does a lot of that stuff just wonderfully. Bernstein, he's got an affinity for Bernstein, but he conducts pops concerts. You know, how many music directors do that? He's out there because he hangs with these people. You know, he's kind of the classical equivalent of some of these rappers that we've worked with or rock stars or jazz greats. And he doesn't look at it like it's beneath him. You know, he's really great about that, about being a musician of the people and really wanting to connect with everybody, not just the hoity-toity. You know what I mean? It's pretty cool.
I did see on your Facebook page recently. Who was the comedian that was talking about how she had?
Oh yeah, yeah. That was awesome. That she had this crush on Gustavo. That was really cute. It was adorable.
Did he see this? I wonder.
I'm sure somebody passed it on to him. He probably got a kick out of it, you know. I'm sure they'll meet at some point. They'll arrange a meeting because people like that are always showing up. You know, Bradley Cooper I think he's slated to do some biopic about Bernstein. He's going to play Bernstein, so he's like constantly during rehearsals sitting right behind us, studying him. You never know who's going to show up, either at a rehearsal or concert. Just you know, Katy Perry, whatever. You know, insane.
That's a rough.
It's LA. Yeah, it's wild. It's wild.
So, and aside from the two conductors we've talked about, who were some of your favorite conductors that you played other than Dudamel and in the time you spent?
These I wrote down because I knew I would blank on it, and I'm sure I'll leave somebody out. Again, 4 o'clock in the morning, I'll sit both up and say, why didn't I remember this guy? In no particular order. Rafael Frubik de Burgos.
Oh yeah,
thought he was great. He was a musician's conductor. He really knew the scores inside and out for starters, but he knew where the difficult spots were, and he would help you through them. He wouldn't take crazy fast tempos to try and widen that crack and make you look stupid. You know, we were all in it together, and he would kind of massage you through those certain difficult paths. Just really, really fantastic. And if you were honest and you worked hard for him, he was most appreciative. If you didn't care, you had a bad attitude, he'd call you on it. He didn't care if he was guest conducting or not. The guy would, he knew what he wanted. But yeah, I really, really respected him, and I'll miss that Paisley shirt. You know, that's the same shirt that we saw at every Bloomstead, another guy. Can you still hear me?
Mine is unstable, but I'm gonna flip it to a.
Did we?
No, we're gonna be okay. I'm gonna make this work. Sorry.
Okay, good.
You good? You can hear me now?
Good. No worries. Yeah, I can hear you. I wonder if it's me, because I took
No. Well, you're freezing on my end, but
plugged in to the Ethernet. I wonder if it's defaulting to Wi-Fi. So I apologize for that. It's me. Another guy.
is that better, by the way?
Yeah, so far so good.
Okay, I just flipped it to my phone. Jim,
Yeah, so
Sax just said, "You're good. I'm the problem."
Nobody has ever said that before to me. It's usually you're the problem. So no, Bloomstead I think is an amazing musician and so impressive. But you froze on me again, Mark.
All right.
But yeah, love that guy. So much class.
Am I freezing again?
A little bit. We're a little out of sync, but that's okay. I'm gonna keep talking.
Okay, you keep talking.
Okay, so Bloomstead, you got all that right. I thought he was amazing.
Yes.
Boulez, I only worked with him a couple times because he didn't guest conduct that much in LA, but was always really impressed with not only his knowledge of the score, his preparedness, but there was just a class about him. It was a calm about him. And I remember having to play shortly after I started here, the Violent Concerto, I think is what I did. And that's one of these pieces that it doesn't give me fits, but I respect it. Let's put it that way. And here I'm playing it with Boulez, and it was a calm experience. I had complete trust in him, and he looked at you like he wasn't waiting for you to screw up. He trusted you, and it was just really great man. Colin Davis, of all people, I don't know. I only probably worked with him once or twice in New York, but I remember being really impressed with him. And I don't even remember why. I remember thinking, wow, I wish we saw guys like that in some of the other orchestras that I worked in. Of course, Solomon, just really a great, solid musician and conductor, and very, very dependable. And yeah, Eschenbach, that's a controversial choice.
Yeah.
But with Houston, there was real chemistry there. That was their golden age, and I understand that the guy that they got now they're very fond of. But there was some amazing chemistry there. When he was good, he was great. So yeah, that was great. And of course, Dudamel,
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, incredible. So, but I'm sure there are tons that I'm leaving out. I'm going to throw her in there. Did we freeze again?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. It's my poker face.
Okay, no worries. Now I got to. Is it Simone Young? Is that the?
Yes.
Am I remembering?
I know who you're saying.
She's only conducted this once, and
right.
It was only on 3 rehearsals. They didn't even give her the full complement of rehearsals, but she had some big reps. She did 4 interludes and also Sprach. And I remember her knowing that she didn't have time to waste, and she was so efficient. And I thought she did a great job, and I'd love to see more of her. Here's another controversial choice, and people are going to be, well, you just lost me on that one, because I remember having this discussion with some people at Aspen. Some Bishkov. And I know he can be pedantic. He can be a little bit like he's lecturing the orchestra, but some orchestras, they need that. He'll stop you and explain what's going on in the music, and he'll explain what you should be listening to, where you need to line up. And I know for orchestras of a certain stature, they're like, we don't need to hear that. We know how to do that. But again, I've been in some situations where that's exactly what the orchestra needed to hear. This is why you guys aren't playing together. And he was really good about lining that stuff up. Maybe he didn't plumb the absolute depths of the piece he was conducting, but he had some housekeeping that he had to attend to first. And he did that, and so I respected that. But yeah, there were a lot of very notable folks that I've worked with that I'm sure I'm forgetting now, but those ones definitely
Were you
pop.
playing? Were you playing Shostakovich or Bishkov?
I played Mahler 5 for Bishkov. That's the first time I played first trumpet on Mahler 5 was with him. I
Oh,
played the Shostakovich, the piano concerto, with Solonin both times. We did it with Bronfman was the pianist the first time I did it, which was amazing. I wish it was the second time because it was good, but I was petrified the first time. I was still on probation. It was like, I wasn't even a year in LA when that happened. And I would have loved to have had him the second time. Of course, the guy's name escapes me now. I'm sorry that I played it with. That we took it to Lincoln Center, and I thought that concert was really, really good. I had a much stronger handle of the piece that
yeah.
time, even though we only rehearsed it once when we got to New York and then played it. But yeah, Solomon did it both times. And again, talk about playing with somebody, you know exactly where you're supposed to be with Esapaka. The stick was so clear. He never screwed up. You know, time to play. You look up, he's already looking at you. Just solid as a rock. So couldn't have asked for a better experience there.
Yeah. And so a couple other questions as we're like rounding third here. What did you have left to do on your master's at Eastman that you finished it 30 years later?
Okay. I think I had like maybe 4 credit hours of electives left. And I had to take, like, there was a listening exam that they warn you, like, during orientation, don't put this off because they only, like, offer it once a year, maybe twice a year. Don't wait till the end of your second year to take this thing. Of course, I didn't take it the first year. So yeah, when I won that job, I was out of there, and I remember my mom was she was upset, because I don't know if I was the first of 5 kids, and I was the youngest to actually complete college. It was a big deal that that her kid was going to get a master's degree, and my wife, fiance at the time, I remember her sticking up for me, saying, he doesn't need it, and it was kind of brave of her to stand up to my mom like that, but she explained, listen, he's doing what he needs. The piece of paper doesn't make that much difference. But it was always one of those things. There was a little lack of closure there. And then my son ended up going to Eastman, trombone player. And when we dropped him off that weekend, we were talking with somebody. I'm sure they were already kind of priming the fundraising pump. It came up that I had gone there, 30 years previous and hadn't finished my degree, and her eyes lit up like, oh, maybe we can do something about this. And then so she got the ball rolling, and they approached the committee about it. And they said, if you can put together a body of work that you've done, recordings, performances, whatever, and if you would come and do a series of master classes, we could probably make this work. Which is exactly what I did. I went out there during my son's sophomore year and gave, I think, 2 master classes and taught a bunch of lessons.
Yeah.
And they said, good. So in some ways, it's sort of an honorary, because I didn't take that listening exam, but I've played, 1,000 times more rep than was ever on that stupid thing. I
Right.
just don't have to worry about misspelling the name of some obscure,
Right.
Renaissance composer.
Yeah, you didn't have to study any Akagon for
No,
that exam.
no, no, no. But I do remember checking out LPs from the Sibley Library. I could do that as a TA and listening to them in my house or in my apartment. There was another guy who's actually on the faculty of Eastman now. We were studying for a listening exam, but I don't know if I ever took it. So.
Well, I think a lot of people. I mean, we're going to talk about. I asked you one of the questions earlier about who you're listening to over the years. Although, I mean, maybe talk about some of the people that we haven't talked about that you were listening to as orchestral players through the years. There were people you looked up to or listened to, or maybe you found interesting for a particular style or a composition.
Well, obviously Hersa. Yeah, I think he was I'd heard orchestral music before, but it wasn't until I got to college that I discovered him. But everybody like immediately you got to listen to her stuff, and it quickly became apparent why. Um, yeah, I think it started there, and then the other ones that were huge influences on me were Jim Thompson, his stuff in Montreal. Stevens, I didn't listen to that much growing up, but when I listen to him now, it's like, man, what a player, amazing player.
Yeah.
Yeah, so mainly those guys, maybe a little Maurice Murphy. Um, um, Maybe not so much New York and Boston. I know great playing going on there, but except Smith, of course.
Yeah.
I think Smith was fairly new by the time I got to college. I think he started there in what, 77, 79, 70,
77,
somewhere in there.
yeah.
77, yeah. And so he was just starting to make a big name for himself. And of course, that blew my mind when I heard him. It's like an even cleaner version of Hurst in some ways. So those were the guys I mainly, I think, modeled my orchestral, and of course hearing Collins live had an enormous impact on me.
Yeah.
So yeah, those were the guys. But the people that are playing today influenced me as well, because they're standing on the shoulders of all those great guys and tweaking that and making that even better.
Yeah.
Today's crop of players are amazing. And you're hearing that kind of playing all over the globe now. America doesn't have the market cornered anymore. If we ever did, we certainly don't anymore. I'm hearing just amazing playing coming out of Europe. Obviously, England has always had amazing players, but Spain and Germany now.
Yeah.
I didn't used to take those guys seriously, in Berlin and Vienna. I just was never. There were things about their playing that bugged me. Yeah, it doesn't bug me anymore. Those guys are monster players. South America, Venezuela, Japan, you hear ridiculous playing. It's everywhere. So yeah, and it's all very very inspiring, and I'm glad that not only do I have tenure, but and again, not that I'm happy that I'm old, but I don't have to compete and try to keep up with it for too much longer, because it's daunting.
Yeah.
Some monster players out there.
Absolutely.
And speaking of sax, holy cow, did he reset that bar? He just stuck it out there, and what a model of consistency and just power and strength and everything, for so many years. Incredible playing. Bilger, um, uh, the Martin brothers, Tom Hooten, of course. Just too many great players to name.
Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah.
So many. And so, a few trumpet questions. Can you kind of describe your warm-up routine?
Yeah. Okay. Sure. I start off with my version of stamp on a mouthpiece. I'll start like on second line G, I think. If my ears are working that day, I don't check it against anything and just do that. So I'll buzz that down, just down to C. So maybe however many notes that is between G and C, and then I'll go to the horn and do the same thing, starting on that second line G, work my way down to C, so that I'm down the pedal Cs. And then at this point, I would usually go to like a Clark 2, the da 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 da. I guess that's Clark 2, right?
Yeah.
I'd start on low G, piano or pianissimo, very softly. I'd slur it once, tongue it once, and I'd go up an octave on that. So by the time I got up to second line G, then I would stop that, and then I would transition from to chromatic scale, starting on low C, just an octave at a time, and I would go up to at least high C. I would slur it once and then triple tongue it maybe 2 or 3 times, just to make sure that I didn't get lucky the first time. So that I've hit a fair amount of disciplines of plates that I need to spin. But yeah, that's about it. It takes about 25 to 30 minutes. If I need to be ready without a warm up, I can probably do it in 2 or 3. It's not optimal,
right?
And it's kind of violent, and I'll pay for it in a day or two. But it'll work, and I've had to do that a couple of times where I really screwed up.
Yeah, but it is true that like having something like that that's consistent is so helpful. I mean, You hear some people say, well, don't depend on it, but that's just because you've built the machine over the years, right? I mean, you've done so
Part
much
of it's that.
that you can get that when you have to have it. But
Yeah, but it also it tends to be a little bit rigid, which is why I just a couple maybe a week or two ago I swapped out that Clark for the I'm doing that one now because I found I've never had great fingers, and some of these etudes are really kind of shining a spotlight on that, and that one in particular makes you do a lot of cross stuff. And I'm immediately finding that certain things they're already cleaner. So it's something I probably should have done decades ago. I get stuck in comfortable routines. I told you I tend to atrophy, which is why I have to force myself into those situations where it makes me honest. But I've also never been a great routine guy because I haven't had teachers that ever either took me through it or insisted on it. I think I was a natural player right off the bat.
yeah,
And because of that, it has pluses and minuses. People kind of left you alone. Like, oh, he's already doing that, and they'd give you material to work on rep. So I was kind of repertoire intensive. And to this day, I never did Schlossberg. I never studied stamp. I do a little bit violin. I recorded those examples for Rob Roy. I got the book 2 days before I recorded that stuff and flipped through it. And then we had a matinee concert that day. And right after that, I set the microphones up and I'd like look at it, play it through once, and then hit record. That's as much violin as I've done. And I'm not saying don't
yeah.
take this the wrong way, boys and girls, that you shouldn't do any of that stuff because I know it's all great for you. It will make you much more consistent players. But yeah, I've never been that guy that had a routine, and I jokingly refer to it as duct tape and baling wire. It's holding my playing together. But I can spin stuff up when I need to. If I see it coming, it's like, oh yeah, I got to get on that and make sure that I've got the range or the tonguing speed or whatever for that.
I remember Rob telling me that you did the violin like after a show in the basement at the hall, and he said, "Isn't that disgusting?"
It was a dressing room.
Yeah,
I do a lot of teaching in there. I nicknamed it the boom room because it's got a hang time of about 12 seconds. It covers all sorts of sins. But I mean, if you get the mics close enough, you hear what's going on there. But it's a very comforting, relaxing room to play in. So I was super relaxed. If I was in the drawer room, I wouldn't have been able to get through 2 of those.
yeah,
But you put me in something that's got a little ambience, and man, I can play for hours.
yeah, yeah. I know that that's been a discussion sometimes in your section. I've seen
Yeah,
Chris still bring that up about because Tom likes a dead room and
yeah,
sort
yeah.
of.
He did a thing while we were on tour, on one of those little video snippets, and it's true. I mean, within reason, the boom room is too much, but I will take that over a dead room. And I do a fair amount of teaching in there, but I've learned to listen through that ridiculous resonance, if you will, or echo, to be able to hear certain things in my students playing. But everybody, we're at least relaxed, and we're trying to figure out ways to work the room. It also immediately tells me if I'm playing a tune or not because the notes hang in the air long enough. I think I explained this in that
Yeah,
video that
yeah, sure.
yeah, so you can hear how those partials line up.
And and so, are you normally warming up on C trumpet, or do you play much B flat?
I almost never play B flat. sorry, Mike, if you're still listening.
Well, he's actually Mike said for me to tell John that he appreciated the shout out and the feeling was very mutual.
That's awesome. Okay, Mark, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I did audition for the Cleveland Orchestra once, and I ate it for a variety of reasons. I was in the middle of negotiating a contract for the Houston Symphony, and we were spending long hours doing that. Excuse. But I showed up not in very good shape and just crapped all over it. But it's probably best that I didn't win that job just because of how they play there. The B flat and the section stuff. I don't play much B flat, although with these etudes, I've played more B flat than I have since college, since undergrad. I used to warm up on B flat as an undergrad, and then when I got to Eastman, Charlie said, "Why are you doing that if you're just going to immediately go right to the C trumpet?" I'm like, oh, I don't know. And from that point on, it was a more efficient way of,
Getting to it.
getting my business done. So,
Yeah.
consequently, it's weird. I can pick up a pick after not having seen it for half a year, and within a minute, no problem. Going the other direction, going to that B flat, it's like a foreign planet to me.
Right.
And it might be because of the horn itself, but it's much harder for me to go in that direction.
And what would be a typical day for you during non-COVID times, as far as you're playing?
Yeah, I would get to the hall probably 30 to 40 minutes ahead of the rehearsal and do my warm up, go on stage. Depends on the day itself. If it were a double rehearsal, we'd have our rehearsals, and then maybe in the evening I'd come home and probably work on next week's material. We do so much new music here, and it's intense stuff. Stuff that, again, the older I get, that I tell people my processing speed starts to diminish. I'm like on a 386 or whatever those things used to be. The first years that came out, it's a really slow processor. So I don't read things. I don't process them quickly enough. I have to play through them enough times that I almost memorize them. And I'm looking at the music more as a reminder. So that takes a lot of repetition. And it's oftentimes on very physical or technical material. So most of my stuff's doing that. I don't do that many etudes. And you can hear it over time, over the span of a couple of weeks. The sound starts to thin out. It's like, oh yeah, I'm getting too far into those weeds, and then I've got to go to maybe a Brandt or a Blazevich, something that's a little thicker, to get some of that sound back. On days where we've got concerts, I'm really careful on those days. I don't do that much. I kind of aim at that. And then after that concert, I might stay for an hour and practice or teach. I'll do it then. I don't teach before concerts because I do a lot of playing in lessons.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just don't have it, probably because of my lack of fundamentals. I don't have the physical bandwidth to play 10 hours a day. I've got to be very efficient with my time and get it done. And so I'm going to save my best for the paying audience.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want to show up tired for them.
I think people who've been watching you play these etudes would argue that you're pretty efficient, though.
Yeah. Well, as efficient as I can be. As you noticed, I'm a little short now. I've lost some weight. Yeah. And so the first 2 weeks of the new videos, because I've already got 2 weeks, I've shaved the day before Super Bowl. The camera angles, man, if I was more vain than I am, and I am to some degree, it would destroy me. But it shows every flaw. My embouchure is like, it's crooked, and then I got these air pockets, and then sometimes my chin bunches. It's amazing that this stuff is coming out. None of that stuff helps with efficiency or strength. I play that way in spite of it. But also know that the microphone, it's a small room. Filling a 7 by 9 foot room is not difficult. And the microphone is 20 inches from my bell. So again, hitting that with energy it doesn't take that much. Filling an auditorium, 2,200 seat auditorium, is a very different proposition. And it's going to be a major shock for a lot of people when they go back to work.
Right.
So I hope managements don't understand this. They're not going to let us ease back in and get up there. But that could lead to some injuries. It's just, you can't practice for that. You can't recreate that at home.
Yeah.
That space. So it's a different type of playing, though. The etudes are very different than orchestral playing.
Right.
I don't have to put out near the volume of sound, it's physically very, very taxing.
What's your mic setup that you're using right now?
I have, I've got a Royer, I've got the baby Royer, the cheap one, the R10. I don't get, remote studio work. I'm not one of those guys, and I don't begrudge. I'm not complaining. If there are any LA guys listening, I know your livelihood depends on it. It's nice work when I get it, but I'm not getting any of that work, so I don't need an R20, a 121, which is like over twice the cost of that. But I was using the old fat head mics for a while, which are good mics for the money, but this just has more detail. It's just a better mic. I've spent a lot of money on this audio interface over here. It's a great interface, but I didn't need to spend that much money on it. Uh, Again, not to get too far into the weeds, a lot of the effects that you can use, if you want to use reverb or compression or whatever, or EQ, you can load that stuff directly onto this unit, so it frees up the CPU on your computer. So, it doesn't tax it. A, I never use that many plugins that it would ever tax it. And B, the proprietary plugins that work on this Apollo Twin, um, I couldn't get them to work as well as the stuff that, like, I use a reverb program called Valhalla that I like. It's just I like the sound of it. You can't load that on there, so I'm using everything on my computer anyway. So I paid a lot for something I'm not using, but for the right people, it's an amazing piece of gear. But I could have probably paid half or less and gotten something that worked as well. So yeah, that's what I'm using. I've got some towels hung behind this microphone. It's a ribbon microphone, so it's called a figure eight pattern. It listens in both directions. So I've got to kind of knock down the reflective wall that comes off the back wall so it doesn't blur. And it's somewhat effective, but it's not like it's the best I can do. Let's put it that way. No, I could deaden the room, but as you know, I hate playing in dead rooms. So
well, it sounds great, and I mean it's amazing you've done so many of these etudes, and so have
too many.
Phenomenal. I mean, yeah, you and Jack Burt and Chris and I think I saw it. Karaja's been playing one a day. I said,
yeah,
just keep it, man.
At least one. I think he's going to pass me before I get to 350. He sounds great,
It's great.
But he's like, every time I flip on Facebook, there's like another 3 or 4 etudes from Chris. It's like, man, dude.
I said, you're going to catch Wilt. He said, not a chance.
Oh, yeah, he will. He will. He's going to run me down in the next week or two.
Well, so how many of these etudes that you have played did you know? I mean, not really a number, but approximately. How many did you know before you started playing these during the pandemic?
Well, I knew a lot of the brands that you've heard. I knew the Charliers, but they weren't they weren't fresh. Let's put it that way. I don't spend a lot of time on Charliers because it takes me away from what I do on the job. It's a different kind of playing. Yeah. Same thing with the Biche book. Same thing with the Shane's book. It's a different kind of playing. It doesn't give me what I need for the job. The Blažević, I really hadn't played that many of them.
Right.
That's a great book that you have published, I believe.
Thank you very much. Well, we have a couple in there that
yes.
we've done.
You do, and they're great etudes. And it's weird to say this, that I'm thankful for the pandemic. That would be an awful thing to say, but it has forced me to get acquainted with that book, and it's really great. And I think it translates well to what I do on the job. They're very sound and strength oriented and long haul oriented. They really work on, if you get a thin sound that day or there's any crap in the sound, which you'll hear on a lot of these etudes, it'll expose that. So yeah, I knew those. The Longinati, again, I knew them, but I hadn't really worked on them since college. And then it drops off. The BAME ones, I know, but they're awkward for me, some of those. I recorded most of them anyway, but they are a little bit awkward. They don't hit my strong suits, but that's why I need to play them. I need to figure out what isn't working and just, you know what, this is what we're going to do today. And you guys get to hear it, you can figure out on your own what works for me and what doesn't. And there are some things that are definitely better than others. But yeah, it's been an interesting ride.
Yeah.
So yeah. I don't know, maybe 40, 50. I ran out of stuff fairly quickly.
Yeah.
I spent it all at once, and it's like, uh-oh, now what? And then I had to start looking for other etude materials, stuff that maybe I hadn't even played that was laying around. And right. And people have sent me stuff. Jim Stevenson sent me some stuff, and Phil Snedeker sent me some stuff that I really hadn't played before. Right. So yeah, it's been new material for a long time now.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. I would think it would help your all the new music pieces you have to do in the orchestra.
It does. Yeah, yeah, it does. And the nice thing about this is if there's a piece, if I crack the page open like this, that looks interesting, and I get like halfway down the page, I'm like, I don't want to play this. I can I can flip the page. I don't get to do that at work. So that's why even as ridiculous as this may look on paper, this etude project, it's still easier than my job.
Wow.
It's still easier than my job.
Wow.
Yep.
No, it's crazy, and I mean, I think it's been really inspiring for a lot of us to. It's like when you're cranking out that many etudes, it's like, well, maybe I should practice more today.
Yeah.
Nothing going on, and
It's it's volume, volume, volume. Yeah, I seem like this guy selling furniture. Uh, Quantity over quality. Yeah, particularly like the first, right up until Christmas, there was this real push that I gotta get something today. The whole the whole idea of this was to produce something every day, and it was a source of great angst and anxiety in my household just to come up with something. And some stuff went out that maybe isn't the most flattering. I was okay with that though, because that's uh, what the parameters were that I had set. But at the Christmas break, I gave myself 2 weeks off, and I said, when I come back, I'm going to take the weekends off, and then I'm just going to try to get somewhere between 2 and 5 a week.
Yeah.
And spend a little bit more time getting to know these, so I'm not quite as anxious when I hit that record button, like what's around the next corner. I don't know this. I don't know what's coming. It was a horrible feeling. But just work out the breathing, or maybe work out how I want to phrase it now. And so I think the ones since, where's my list? There was like the last James I posted was the one I recorded right after. Yeah, this is the third of these sheets that I've got all the etudes written in the order that I recorded them, and that's the order that I post them, so I know where they are. Yeah, the Shane 6 was the one I recorded right after the Christmas break, and from those on, I'm just being a little bit more conscientious about it. I'm not saying that, again, they're radically better, but they should be maybe sound a little bit more well thought out. Yeah, even though I said 2 to 5, I've actually gotten 5 a week since we've been back. But I don't feel like I need to, because I've given myself permission to just get 2. If that's all you're going to get, that's all you're going to get. So it's taken some of the heat off. I was miserable every day. I was miserable, and it wasn't so much how I'm going to play; it's what am I going to play. Wow. Going to bed that night not knowing what I'm going to play the next morning was horrible. If I at least got a chance to kind of look through it the evening before, and so that the next morning I can kind of touch a few spots and then hit record, then I was okay. But just not having any idea, it was just horrible.
Well, now you've got 2 more books that I told you about with Fritz's stuff.
Yeah, I'll have to get those. Yeah, I don't know how Fritz feels about the ones I've already recorded. He's probably like, "That's not what I wrote," because I didn't listen to his examples. He's got some stuff in there. Just, went for it, and it may not have had anything to do with what he envisioned, but
he's the nicest guy. I'm sure he's happy that you did. And Karajev said there's still no chance to catch Wilt.
Not true. Not true. He and Jack are prodigious, man. Those guys.
And Chris.
Yeah, Chris, but I don't think Chris does 3 or 4 a day.
No.
Jack, I'll turn around and, man, he's just like added 5 today. What happened?
Jack I think Jack's so excited about his new rotary trumpet.
Yeah. You can tell. It's really fun to watch him. He's just a big kid, He still loves it.
Well, it's fun to watch you guys kind of encourage each other.
Yeah. And that's something I want to talk about, if I can, if we have time.
We have as much time as you want.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't mean to single anybody out here, but kind of early on, I saw a lot of people were posting things, which I think is great. We're performers. We need to perform. We don't have venues. We don't have opportunities to communicate with our audience anymore. And so people are doing it. But there was a lot of judgment about what was good enough to be posted. And again, I'm not trying to call anybody out. This is all a very new landscape. And that really bugged me. Trumpet players, we tend to be very competitive. Um, we're
Yeah.
not always the most supportive folks. And I didn't think now was the right time for that. I think we should really encourage each other.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I am not here to knock anybody down. If you got the stones to post something, do it. And if somebody doesn't like it, just skip through it. You don't need to tell somebody how much they suck or complain about it. Just skip over it.
Yeah.
Let them say what they have to say. It's a great format.
Yeah. Well, and I think what you guys have done is a real service. I mean, first of all, I mean, it does keep people motivated. I mean,
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, whether you guys really realize that or not. Yeah, I mean, and Tony Priss just said amen, and I agree because Tony's put out some phenomenal content too.
Yes, and it's really interesting that sectional stuff. It's great.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
It's great, and like you said, I think we need that, and we need guys like you guys doing it, and it's also, I think, probably made people crank their etude books out a little bit more than they would have before, or gone to some different things. And I think the trumpet has, we have such limited repertoire in some ways, but I think what you guys have shown is there's a tremendous amount of repertoire that's completely acceptable on a stage. I mean,
yeah,
some etude be done as a suite or just a standalone piece that, it doesn't always have to be the same 6 sonatas and 5 concertos.
Yeah, it's interesting you should say this, because right, like at the start of this pandemic, the Philharmonic was asking people if they could record some kind of video performance, and I'm thinking, I can't play any. There aren't any pieces out there that I can't hold an audience's attention for 5 minutes. What am I going to do? And then I think Phil Collins had just like he was either wrapping up this new book, these performing etudes, and he started posting them on Facebook like a sample. I'm like, oh, that looks interesting. Yeah. And that's when this started. I'm like, oh, maybe I'll try to record that and see if that'll work for the Philharmonic. And the first several of these etudes that I posted were Phil's things. So that's what started. And I think they used 3 of those for one of these Philharmonic things. And that really is what got this thing started. But I want to say, and I've said this before, to reiterate, these are jumping off points, the stuff that I put down. I in no way am trying to say that these are definitive or perfect or in any way. It's like a snapshot. It's a time capsule for me of where I was in this pandemic, and a way to keep me honest.
Well,
for reasons that we've already talked about.
Well, no, I think it's, as somebody who teaches a lot of students, I'm like, okay, you're going to go to this YouTube site. You're going to watch Jim play an etude. It's like, it can be mind blowing. Just like Håkan playing the
Charliers. It's amazing.
Forget it,
but just like Håkan and just like me, that is not the way to play the Charlier. That is a way to play the Charlier. So I would never say this is the way to play this etude. Right. It's a jumping off point, guys, and just add your own stuff. A lot of these things, some of them I thought about, some of them I didn't. Håkan obviously has thought long and hard and deeply about what he's done. There's a lot more quality control going on over on that side of the ocean, but he's got more to lose than I do. He's Håkan Harden, what's his face, after all. So yeah, there's much more expected of him, and he's a brilliant player. It's amazing. Yeah. But it's one way to play it.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I'm seeing some people just writing comments. Sherry Cole's written that you've been very motivating for her, and Mike Baker is talking about how kind it is, and he's grateful for the kind. It does feel like it's more of a community since this pandemic in a way.
It is, and it's really kind of cool to see. And Cherry's really been putting herself out there. She picks really hard stuff and goes for it. It's so cool to see that. She's not playing it safe. She loves the hard stuff. And Mike, I didn't really know Mike before. We kind of met. I think New York was on tour West Coast, and I think Phil, his daughter, was like graduating, so he took it off. So they brought me in to cover Matt Mucky's parts, and then Matt moved up to Phil's stuff, and I believe Mike was in the section there. But Matt and I had already had our little internet tiff. Again, I take full responsibility for that. I was a jackass. We've been down that road, but obviously those guys were probably a little wary of this is the a-hole that treated Matt the way he did. Anyway, so it's nice to reconnect with Mike.
Yeah.
On Facebook, and he sounds great.
Oh, his
just beautiful playing.
Those cornet solos when he plays those lyrical things, it's sickening how beautiful.
Yeah. That guy can play.
Yeah. And so I think everybody's just so glad you're doing this and appreciative of it, and I also love the intros. Those have been watching the filter. I mean, I know I told you. My favorite two were the one with your son playing the Blazevich in the opposite room.
That was fun.
And probably the early one with your wife, where she just keeps pouring the wine.
Yeah.
She's a great actress.
They start off as little kernels, and then we're like, well, what if we did this and let's do this, and then you take a couple of shots of it, and if nothing else, I've learned how to. I'm not great at it. It's still campy. It's but the editing, just to kind of get the timing down. Obviously, the videography is horrible. I've got this little Canon here. There's no lighting or anything, but that's kind of what makes it charming. Right. But yeah, they're fun. I figure if I'm going to make somebody sit through these damn etudes, you might as well kind of give them something funny to start with. But that in itself is a point of contention, because I've heard people complain, can't you just skip those damn things and get right to the, I mean, I won't call. I was about to reveal a name, but I won't. And I wish I knew how to put that index on there. I tried to. I don't know if YouTube has changed that, the ability to click here and take you directly to that spot. But anyway, because once you've seen it, you don't need to see it 50 more times.
Well, somebody told me the other day that my intro was too long and it should be 10 to 15 seconds max. And I said, I'm sure my sponsors would really appreciate that.
Right. So, and just tell them, well, when you make your videos, you can do that. And I'm looking forward to seeing those.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you very much.
Exactly. And I guess probably the last real question is was Ron Burgundy your favorite Trumpet Herald troll?
Of course. There's this other guy called the Goat, and I'm guessing who is it? Is it somebody in Colorado, perhaps? I'm guessing it might be JB, but he had a comment once that I thought, that was pretty good. You sucked me in. He got me. He trolled me, but it was a good troll, and I even PM'd him saying, whoever you are, that was pretty good. There are some trolls that I don't like, and they actually turn me off to the site.
I don't go on there anymore because we don't go to Facebook anymore as much. But did I get you and Manny at the same time about saying I was going to yell Mambo at an Atlanta Symphony audition?
I think I would laugh if I saw that, but I'm sure I got sucked into some things that were complete.
I did, and I said I want to know what syllable I need to accent when I yell Mambo, because it's tough. And
that's hilarious. Big Man was another one that was Izzy Big Man.
Yes.
But I always loved his stuff. But there are a few guys on there who I think their trolling was kind of mean-spirited, and it was in a way that you really couldn't defend yourself without looking bad. And back when that stuff started, I didn't even understand what trolling was. I get it now, and I can appreciate a good troll, but sometimes it's like, guys, don't waste my time,
I never really did it, and then the first thing I put up was I had a screen name that was Double Buzz. And the very first thing was that I wanted to know, if I took laxatives, I could play higher, because then I didn't have to push and squeeze. And it led to 5 pages of people telling me all the medical issues.
Reasons not to do it. I think it would work the other way, actually.
Yeah.
You'd have to squeeze even harder, right?
Well, that's where I learned that Louis Armstrong was a Swiss Chris laxative spokesman.
I did not know
And then if
that.
you hear some of his tunes, he starts singing about Swiss Chris Laxus. And then I learned he actually gave some to the Queen of England.
Wow. Did she know it, or did she just slip it into her tea?
I'm not
Because
sure.
that would be a funny troll right there.
That would be Louis Armstrong would be the ultimate troll if he
Yeah,
slipped
yeah.
it the
I would
tea.
respect him even more. But that reminds me of a story. It might have been Eastman, I forget, that these guys were about to play Mahler 2, warming up on stage. And the principal trumpet player thought he'd be cute and kind of lift his cheek and kind of gas out the section. He got a little bit more than he bargained for, and then he had to sit through Mahler 2 minute. The next hour and 45 minutes. I wasn't there for it. It wasn't me. But yeah, we had some lyrics to da da dum da 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 dum bum, and I won't get into that. But
Right,
yeah,
right. Excellent. Well, Jim, this has been great. I mean, I think everybody's been watching you do these things, and Jack and Tony and Chris and Chris, and it's terrific, and it's really healthy for everybody what you guys are cranking through, and maybe I like the intro best when you didn't turn on the tape recorder, so you said for the 250th after you got
oh
the
yeah, you asked. That was one of your pre-questions. That has happened. It didn't happen that time. That one was staged. But there have been. I've got two recorders. You got the video recorder and this. Um, that has happened where I've looked at the blank screen, either because I forgot to hit record or this microphone is phantom. I've got a phantom booster on it, and if that gets turned off, you don't notice it, and then you look over and there's nothing. You've just spent your face and maybe 3 or 4 or 5 minutes on something, and it's gone.
wow.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
Well,
I don't make that mistake anymore.
and thank your wife for listening to all these. For
Oh man, she's a saint. Certain days are better than others. If I'm being really anal retentive and playing the same lick 50 times, she'll whistle and like knock it off, and I've got to just stop, until she's cooled off. But yeah, it's tough. She's hearing a lot more of this kind of stuff than she does when I'm at work. But she's been a good sport.
that's great.
Do you like the new intro? Do
I,
you like the homage to the original one? You know the way I tied it in there.
I thought there was sort of a cyclical.
Yeah, yeah. There's an arc to it, and I thought it's a little tacky, but maybe I paused a little bit too long when I was looking for the fly. But I
No,
can't overthink that stuff.
I think it's great. I think it's,
Okay, okay.
and I also think it's great. You have one of those old Bach white plastic nibs.
Yeah. Speaking of Phil Collins, he used those when he was in Cincinnati, and always sounded gorgeous on them. They're better than the black ones.
Oh, absolutely.
They're a little thicker and just a beautiful sound. And I could never find one. And one of my old students, Hunter Averly, principal in Detroit, he hoards these things. He's got like hundreds of them. Well, maybe not hundreds, but I remember I did something for him. I think I demonstrated a Christmas oratorio or something for him when I had the flu right before his Cincinnati audition. So he sent me one as a thank you, and yeah, they're great meats.
Yeah, I know Marie has one, and I used it in school, and then she's like, "No, I need that back."
Yeah, because they're hard to find.
Yeah,
People will buy horns on eBay that have in the picture they see the white mute. They'll buy it, keep the mute, and then resell the horn.
exactly.
That's what Hunter does that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Hunter, if you're watching, I'll give you my email address if we can talk about it. So, anyway, Jim, thank you so much for doing this. And
Oh, this was fun, Mark.
yeah, and
Enjoyed it.
hang on for a second. We'll chat after. But thanks for everybody who watched tonight. And
thanks for putting up with me, guys. I know I get very verbose.
Perfect. No, it's all good. Thanks so much, and thanks for everybody who watched. And I'll see you next week. Okay, take care.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.